You all know that I'm a farmer's daughter. So the images that are raised by the prophet Joel are powerful images to me, because these images are images of an agrarian people, people who are farmers for their livelihood, people whose lives are devastated if their crops are devastated. Joel speaks to people, the Israelites, the Jews, who are in captivity, who own their entire livelihood to what they can grow from the ground. And he speaks at a time when they have been plagued by locusts. Now, we may think that this is just something that's in the Bible, and we think, well, what word is spoken to us here? But I can tell you that locusts are alive and well in the world today. They're rather large bugs that are preys and predators of everything that grows in the earth, everything that, any kind of plant that grows on the face of the earth. And as recently as 2004, there was a plague of locusts in Africa. And it is written what it's like to be invaded by a plague of locusts. It's like a big black cloud that hovers right by the surface of the earth, and it moves very quickly towards you. And what it really is this one cloud that was, this plague that was recorded in Africa in 2004 was something like 64 million locusts. They were 150 miles long, 150 miles long, and 90 miles wide. And it was all locusts, and they were coming forward, eating everything in their wake, and they destroyed all the crops. And anybody who farms knows that when you destroy the crops and you destroy everything that's growing, it's not just that 1 year. It takes many years to recover from that. So Joel is taking that plague, and he's saying to the Israelites, you didn't pay attention to God, so you're being punished. Now that's a theology that we don't believe in anymore. We know better than that because of Jesus and the life of Jesus. But Joel is using this to tell the Israelites, you're not really in control here. God is in control. There is a loving, gracious, higher power that is in control. And the verse that needs to be paid most attention to in the prophet Joel is the verses that we read on Pentecost Sunday. Then afterward I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. Even on the male and female slaves, in those days I will pour out my spirit. God is present. God's loving, gracious, creative spirit is present even in the worst of times. That's basically the message of the prophet Joel. And we get so focused on the hard times and the locusts and the destruction and all of that, and we get so focused on blaming God for all of that stuff that really is an act of nature, that we forget to remember how very present God is and how God's holy, gracious, creative spirit is upon us. We try so much to be in control. 2 Timothy is kind of the end of an effort to control the Holy Spirit in the Christian church. You see, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus are all letters that were written by the same person, someone who wanted to be as respected as Paul, but wouldn't have been if he'd used, or maybe she, their own name. So he uses the name of Paul, and he talks to the early Christian church about how to go about organizing themselves So it's like they're taking this, the freedom of the Holy Spirit that has empowered these early Christians, and tried to channel that freedom into a structure and an order. And 1st and 2nd Timothy are the places where we hear about deacons and elders and councils and bishops and, who's supposed to speak in church and who's not supposed to speak in church, and all of these things that try to control the power of the Holy Spirit that came onto the church at Pentecost. And yet, in this chapter that we just read, it's the very end of 2 Timothy, and it is the author's nod to the fact that God is indeed in charge, that it's not us that can control any of this. And it starts so beautifully because he says, as for me, I am already being poured out as a libation. Now, I think of libation as a stiff scotch or a nice glass of wine. I think of the word libation as an alcoholic beverage, and I'm thinking, you're being poured out like a libation. What the heck does that mean? There was no connect. But if you look up the word libation in the dictionary, you find that the first definition is to be poured out as an offering. That Paul says, as for me, I am being poured out as an offering, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. He's saying that he has done everything that he can to serve God, to be good to God, and that through all these trials and tribulations and the churches that he started that don't listen to him and don't pay attention to him, that he realizes that his effort is not for naught. His effort is well made because God is with him and will always be with him, and that everybody else fell away, but God was still there with him. So he can say, I poured out my life like a libation, like an offering. It was good. It was a good thing to do. Now, that calls to question a wonderful thing for all of us sitting in the pews today. How do we pour out our lives as a libation? As I got to thinking about that this week, I was thinking about my first mission trip to Nicaragua. And I think it was back in 1995 or something like that. I spent a whole week in a little village in Nicaragua with no running water, with showers were standing on a cinder block in a protected area, dumping water over my head. I mean, it certainly wasn't a shower. And we were filthy dirty. We worked hard every day. We came home just exhausted. We were wakened at dawn by the crow of the rooster. It was poverty living that I had never experienced before. And I came home from that week with the deepest sense of joy that I think I had ever experienced in doing the work of the church. And I realized this week that being poured out like a libation, that's what it's about. It's about giving totally of ourselves, because we understand so deeply this power of God's love and graciousness that is with us, that is in us and fills us and empowers us, that we give because of everything that we've been given. That's being poured out like a libation. Yesterday, Sandy and Ruth and Ruby and I went to the Seamen's Church Institute in Port Newark and spent the morning packing scarves and hats and socks and sweater vests and helmets, hand-knitted products for the seafarers, for the Christmas at sea. And I think we packed 700. I think that's right. I think we packed 700. We take a bag, a cloth bag that was already made, and we put one knit gift into it, and then a couple of toiletry articles and tighten up the bag, and they put 10 bags into great big red bags that would then go to the different barges that come through with the seafarers on them, and they'll be given out at Christmas time, at a Christmas party. That wasn't pouring our lives out like a libation. That was giving up a Saturday morning when Sandy and I would have been sleeping in our pajamas and showing up at church at 9 o'clock in the morning with a cup of coffee in hand. That's what it means to be a libation. And I think for Pompton Valley Presbyterian Church as a body, we need to think carefully about what it means to be a libation right about now. You know, each and every one of us can be a libation, but our community, our congregation, we need to be a united body libation to this world in faithfulness for everything that's been done for us. We need to give back right about now. And we've got big decisions ahead of us. We've said this, and our leadership council on November 12th is going to be making decisions about how we engage everyone to make those decisions. So I would ask for your prayers for us to make wise decisions. I would ask for your personal comments to be given to myself or the elders as we make choices. We want to include everyone. We want everyone to be a part of this important process. So I'm going to close by sharing with you, I get a daily meditation from Richard Rohr, who is one of the most awesome Franciscan priests I know. He speaks my language. And I get a daily meditation, and this is the meditation for today, and I think it speaks very clearly to George is going to turn his phone off. Thank you, George. I think it speaks very clearly to our situation and where we are at this time in our lives as a community. It's called You Need to Be Shoved. He says, creativity and newness of life have a cost. And the cost is what appears to look like death. But really, it is not. It is just letting go of one thing to make room for another thing. Loss is always perceived as an enemy or affliction and looks like what we don't want. Somehow, to embrace loss, spiritually speaking, is to achieve something more and something bigger. Some form of positive dying invariably allows us to be united with what is larger reality. But of course, we never know that ahead of time. So if you spend your whole life avoiding dying, the spiritual teachers would say, you will never get there. He says, meditate on the phrase Jesus gave us. Unless the grain of wheat dies, it remains just a grain of wheat. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. That quotation is about as counterintuitive as you can get. Rationally, I cannot prove that to you. You have to walk through it. You have to experience it to know that it is in fact true, and true for you. Frankly, none of us go there unless we are shoved. My friends, we are being shoved. So let us all learn through this holy shove that we are being given to be a libation. And let all God's people say, amen.